everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Table Talk Sessions, the True Crime Chronicles. Fun fact about myself, I enjoy listening to court cases and true crime. I listen to trials, opening and closing arguments of cases, and I have stumbled across so many interesting stories, especially last year, 2024. Table Talk Sessions is about having authentic conversations. So I hope that by sharing some of these crimes or cases that it will generate not only conversations, but being more cognizant to the relationships and friendships that we entertain, and of course, watching for those red flags. So today, we're discussing one of the most chilling and tragic cases, the Chris Watts case. This case shocked the nation as the family's disappearance led to a gruesome discovery, a shocking confession, and a media frenzy. If you have Netflix, I highly recommend watching the documentary and YouTube's trial segments. So let's dive into the details. Chris Watts lived what many would describe as a normal life with his wife Shanann and their two young daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste. On the surface, the family appeared to have it all. Chris worked as an oil field operator, and Shanann was active on social media, sharing their family's high moments, laughter, just fun times. However, on August 13th, 2018, everything changed. Shanann and the children were reported missing, and Chris publicly pleaded for their safe return. In a moment, I will play the recording from Chris Watts' interview with the news prior to admitting to killing his wife and kids.
The most important thing, I'm not sure, I'll just wait for you to ask a question, but it's, I want them, wherever they're at, I have no inclination of where they're at right now. I've exhausted, every friend that I know of, and every friend that I have has called friends that Shanann has that maybe I didn't know about, and it's just it's vanished. She's not, when I got home yesterday, it was like a ghost town. She wasn't here. Kids weren't here. I have no idea, where they went. And it's just earth-shattering. I don't feel like this is even real right now. It's like a nightmare that I just can't wake up from.
Chris, when did you learn that they weren't here?
I texted her a few times and called her. I didn't get a response, which that was a little off. And then her friend Nicole showed up about a little after noon. I could see it on the doorbell camera. And I was like, hey, what's going on? She's like, I can't get a hold of Shanann. And that's when I was just like, all right, something's not right. If she's not answering the door, and she said the car was here, it's like, I gotta go home. And we got here, got inside, and nobody was here. Nothing.
And so I read that Shanann hadn't taken the girls to school, which was unusual.
Yeah, because Bella was gonna start kindergarten next Monday, and they were just getting ready to start back again.
And so your friend Nicole kind of tipped you off at something.
Yeah, because she was here at the front door, and that's when I kind of knew, okay, if she's not answering anybody else either, this isn't like her, because she works at direct sales business, and that's what she does. And for her not to respond to any of her people, if she doesn't respond to me, that's fine. She's busy, she's got stuff going on, but not to respond to her people, though, that was not like her.
Chris, you've got a beautiful family, and it looks like you all love each other very much. What went through your mind the minute you're like, something's wrong?
I was trying to get home as fast as I can. I was blowing through stoplights. I was blowing through everything, just trying to get home as fast as I can, because none of this made sense. If she wasn't here, where did she go? Once I got here, it was all right, who can I call? Who do I know that she could be with right now? If she went to a friend's house, where could she be staying? And we went through everybody. Just everything in my contact list and her friend's contact list, and nothing has come up. Everybody has said they haven't heard from her either. I'm just hoping.
Let's break down the events. According to Mercury News, in August 2018, Chris Watts, a man from Frederick, Colorado, was arrested after his wife Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, went missing. The family's disappearance sparked an extensive search, and their bodies were later found on a property owned by Chris Watts' former employer, where he had worked as an oil field operator. The timeline of events began on Monday, August 13th, when Chris Watts left his home around 5:30 a.m. Surveillance footage later showed him backing his pickup truck into the garage. He told police that he was leaving for work at a job site about 40 miles away. By that afternoon, a friend of Shanann's came to the house after being unable to reach her, prompting a call to both Chris and the police. Chris did not return home until after the police officer had arrived at 1:40 p.m. On August 14th, when Shanann and the girls remained missing, police launched an investigation. This included a drone search at the Ondarko site where disturbed earth was found, as well as a bedsheet matching one from the Watts home. Later, on August 15th, Chris Watts was arrested after giving investigators a new story. He confessed to having an affair and claimed that around 4 a.m. on August 13th, he told Shanann he wanted a separation. Watts claimed that Shanann then killed their daughters, leading him to murder her in a rage. He said he disposed of their bodies at the Ondarko site. Shanann was buried in a shallow grave, and the girls were placed in oil tanks. Chris Watts was charged with the murders of his wife and daughters, as well as the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, as she was 15 weeks pregnant at the time. Chris Watts' confession to his father, Ronnie Watts, is a significant moment in the investigation into the murders of Shanann Watts and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste. This event is detailed in the arrest affidavit and related records. Here's an explanation of what transpired. After failing a polygraph test on August 15, 2018, Chris Watts was confronted by investigators about inconsistencies in his statements. Before making his confession, Chris requested to speak privately with his father, who had traveled to Colorado to support him during the investigation. During the conversation with his father, Chris admitted to killing Shanann. However, he claimed that the killings were a reaction to seeing Shanann harm their daughters. Chris alleged that Shanann had strangled Bella and Celeste after he told her he wanted to separate, and that he killed Shanann in a fit of rage in response. This narrative shifted suspicion further onto Chris. Investigators had already gathered evidence that contradicted his initial claims that he did not know where Shanann and the children were. The story he provided to his father mirrored what he later told investigators during the subsequent interrogations. However, this version of events was inconsistent with the forensic evidence. After Chris's confession to his father, investigators continued questioning him and ultimately arrested him. Further evidence, including the location of the bodies, Chris's affair, and his lack of emotional response, supported the conclusion that Chris was solely responsible for the murders. Chris Watts later admitted in court that his initial claim of Shanann harming the children was false. He ultimately pleaded guilty to all charges, confirming that he had planned and carried out the murders of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. The arrest affidavit for Chris Watts highlights the crucial role played by Shanann's friend, Nicole Atkinson, in initiating the concern over Shanann's disappearance. Key details about Nicole's involvement include so many helpful things to the investigators, and I want to take a moment to just give a shout out to Nicole for being an amazing friend. We hope to have friends like Nicole who know our friends' patterns, who knows when it's not normal for them not to pick up the phone, and show so much of a concern that not only did she call her friend, text her friend, but I actually went to the home to check on her. So obviously it seems that Shanann was communicating with her bestie like, hey girl, I got some stuff happening in my marriage. Who knows if Shanann told Nicole the extreme or like the deep level secrets or the things that may have been happening behind the scenes. But the fact that this friend showed up and really was pleading with the police department and like, no, something is not right. We all need a friend like Nicole, for real. Have one. But getting back to the case. So, Nicole Atkinson, a close friend of Shanann, became concerned when Shanann missed a scheduled OBGYN appointment on August 13th, 2018. Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant at the time, and it was highly unusual for her to miss such an appointment without noting or notifying anyone. So, Nicole repeatedly tried to contact Shanann through calls and text messages, but received no response. She also visited Shanann's home that day, but found no one answering the door. Nicole noticed that Shanann's car was still parked in the garage, and her shoes, ones that Shanann often wore, were by the door. This further raised Nicole's concerns that Shanann might still be inside the house, but unresponsive. So, realizing that something was wrong, Nicole contacted the Frederick Police Department and requested a welfare check. This action prompted officers to visit the Watts home, marking the beginning of the investigation. During the welfare check, Nicole and the responding officers discovered Shanann's phone, purse, and other personal belongings inside the house, which heightened suspicions of foul play. I mean, it's 2025, most people have their phone on their person. Most people, especially a female, would have their purse, especially when they're caring for their young children. And obviously, she's not in the home, but they're finding these things that she would have on her person. Okay. So Chris Watts was present during this time and reportedly seemed calm but uncooperative, offering vague explanations about Shanann's whereabouts. Nicole Atkinson's proactive actions were pivotal in alerting the authorities to the disappearance of Shanann and her daughters. Ultimately, it was Nicole's actions that led to the uncovering of the tragic events. It was Nicole who found those personal items that she knew belonged to her friend. And Nicole's attentiveness and determination played a key role in the early stages of the investigation. So again, shout out to Nicole, and we need that kind of friend who really loves us and is looking out, and they're paying attention to the things that we say, right? You have those friends that maybe listen, but they're not like in tune, possibly, but this lady was in tune with her friend. The arrest affidavit for Chris Watts, dated August 16, 2018, outlines the investigation into the disappearance and subsequent deaths of his wife, Shanann Watts, and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste. The key points that I do want to point out from the affidavit are that the initial report on August 13th, 2018, it said that's when their daughters were reported missing, as well as Shanann, from the home in Frederick, Colorado. Now, Chris Watts claimed he last saw his wife around 5:15 a.m. before leaving for work. Now, if you watch the documentary from Netflix or you listen to the YouTube trials, it talks about how Shanann had just gotten home. She went to North Carolina to visit her family and had gotten back, or she had a work obligation, but she got back or like early that morning, like 1 something in the morning. Now, when we talk about the discovery of their bodies, the bodies of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were found on the property of the petroleum plant where Chris Watts was employed. So the location where he decided to dispose or tried to dispose of their bodies was where he worked. Shanann's body was located in a shallow grave, and then the bodies of the two children were actually found in oil tanks. And I mean, I didn't provide the pictures, but they were tall. And it's just a simple fact that this man put these babies in these oil tanks to basically try to hide what he had done. Chris Watts' account initially, he denied involvement in their disappearance, right? And we saw in the video where he's pleading for people to help find the family, but he was denying any involvement. After failing, though, a polygraph test, he confessed to killing Shanann, but claimed it was in a fit of rage after witnessing her strangling their daughters following his request for separation. So, allegedly, right, what Chris was saying is he asked his wife for separation, aka leading towards a divorce, and they got into a altercation or a fight over this, and she ends up killing her daughters, is what he was initially claiming, that the wife ended up trying to or hurt the children over her being mad about him asking for a separation. That was his excuse or his story. Now, the affidavit also mentions that Chris was having an affair, which he initially denied to the investigators. And so she's pictured here. If you're listening to the podcast, then you won't see it. But those of you that are watching, so Nicole, which is not her friend that we're mentioning right now, but Nicole was the lady in which he was having the affair. Detectives found out after he had denied that was the case. Because I'm sure the detectives were probably going to ask, hey, were you and your wife on good terms? Like, were there any issues or any problems? And he denied, that aspect of the affair initially, but did share that he had asked for separation. Now, as it relates to the charges, Chris was arrested and charged with multiple counts, including first-degree murder and unlawful termination of a pregnancy, because Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant. And not to be graphic or insensitive, like just hearing about how they found her body is just tragic as it pertains to the pregnancy. But I'm not even going to go into that because that's just a lot. In a moment, though, I will play the recording from Inside Edition where Nicole is finding Shanann's personal belongings. So you'll hear the audio of that, and also be able to hear when the detectives arrive to the home for the wellness check, the reactions of Nicole versus the husband.
Nicole?
Yes.
Okay.
In this just-released video, we're seeing the unsung hero whose determination may have stopped Chris Watts from getting away with murdering his pregnant wife and 2 little daughters. Nicole Atkinson knew something was wrong when her best friend Shanann Watts didn't turn up for a doctor's appointment. She immediately called police.
I can't get a hold of her. I've called, I've texted. Her car's in the garage, her shoes she wears every single day right in the front door.
The police body cam video shows Chris Watts arriving home. Imagine his surprise at finding cops already at his house. He had just disposed of the bodies of his wife and children in an oil storage facility where he worked.
Nobody's heard from her, nobody's seen her.
But thanks to Nicole, he's had no time to get rid of personal items that his wife would have taken with her if she was staying with a friend, as Chris Watts was claiming.
Her phone's here? Yeah. Her phone's here.
She also discovers Shanann's purse.
That's her purse. It's her medication. She takes these, her medication's still in here.
Nicole is clearly worried. She knows something is wrong. Watts tries to avoid making eye contact with her. Because of Nicole, his story is already falling apart. And this is the moment Watts realizes he was caught on a neighbor's surveillance camera backing his pickup truck into his driveway. Out of view of the camera, he is loading the 3 bodies on the truck. Out of Watts' hearing, his neighbor tells police he is suspicious.
He looks like he's trying to cover his tracks.
Chris Watts looks as if his world is about to collapse.
Chris Watts was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, among other charges. And in a plea deal, Watts pled guilty to all charges, sparing his family from the trauma of a lengthy trial. During the sentencing hearing, emotional victims were able to give their impact statements, and there was an impact statement made on behalf of Shanann's family. and they spoke about the pain of losing their loved ones. And of course, they had just spent a lot of weeks with this family without Chris. Chris came up, I think they said, for a couple of days, but they had spent a lot of time, which I'm sure that they are grateful for in retrospect or hindsight, now knowing what would happen. But being able to have that quality time with just their daughter and grandchildren, I'm sure they're appreciative for those moments. But ultimately, Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, this is the first True Crime Chronicle, and if you made it this far, thank you for following along. As we shared, this is a heartbreaking story. But I am going to end off with two questions. The first question is, how can we identify the early signs of toxic relationships or emotional abuse before it escalates into more serious harm? So sometimes we're listening to relationships from our friends or family member, and they're sharing maybe things that are happening in their relationship. It's important to take note of what are some early signs that could lead to harm. So knowing what those are. The second question is, what are the key steps a woman should take if she feels unsafe or experiences drastic changes in her partner's behavior? So say someone that we're in a relationship with, and we learn their mannerisms, we learn their behaviors, especially if we're with them over a year's time. Something that I recall hearing Judge Lynn Toller saying, or even when I watch Divorce Court from time to time, they'll mention how you have a representative that shows at least for a year minimum. I want to say even Judge Mathis talks about this as well. You really don't know a person until well after a year. It's hard to keep a persona in such for a long, long period of time. So what are key steps a woman should take if she feels unsafe or is experiencing from her relationship or her friendship drastic changes in a partner's behavior? So when we say partner, when you're in a relationship with that person and they're emotionally not in tune, and they're like having drastic behaviors, what are some things that she should do to make sure that she's staying safe? And so some look fors that I found, of course, through research, is that you want to look for signs of manipulation or control or secrecy in the relationship. If someone's in an emotional or abusive situation, they may not necessarily speak on the relationship, or the person that's their partner may be extremely controlling or use word power for manipulation with that person. As it relates to changes in the partner's behavior or attitudes, they may indicate frustrations or unresolved issues, and they manifest, over time of the relationship. But definitely something to think about. If you enjoyed today's session, please comment, like, and subscribe, and let me know if you enjoyed it. Also, look out for the next episode. Until then, be blessed.